बस नेड़े नेड़े वे ढोला बस नेड़े नेड़े वे ढोला सानू हरदम तेरियां लोड़ां
My name is Salima Hashmi, and currently I'm Dean of the School of Visual Arts and Design at the Beacon House National University, which is a very young university to set up a decade ago, and it's a private university. So, but I served for 30 years at the National College of Arts, Lahore, which is the oldest and the primary institution in the teaching of art, design and architecture in Pakistan. It was one of the four set up in the 19th century by the British at Madras, Lahore, Bombay and Calcutta. So, but I went there as a student and later taught there and eventually ended up as a professor of fine art and was the principal for 4 years. And I've also been involved in the Women's Action Forum and the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. The Beacon House school system, as distinct from the university where I am, is a network of schools set up by one rather remarkable lady. This is Mrs. Nasreen Kasuri, who many years ago started a little nursery in her mother's garage, and from there went on to establish schools in Lahore and eventually all over Pakistan. The university, they decided it was a sort of venture into higher education, setting aside funds for a foundation. So it's a not-for-profit foundation, and the idea was to go into liberal arts education. So this was for art, design, architecture, literature, cultural studies, psychology, social science. I mean, this was the thinking when they set this up as a private foundation. Of course, it has government representation on the board, as all private universities are required to do under the law if they are recognized by the Higher Education Commission. So it's monitored and it works closely with the government in terms of rules and regulations. But it is a private university, and they invited me to set up the School of Art and Design. The university is not aimed to be a large university at any stage. It's aimed to be a medium-sized, smaller university. It's now got its own campus built outside Lahore, and it has about 1,500 students. It will go up to 3,000, not more than that. And what is special with us is, in our school, we have scholarships for students from all over South Asia. So we have currently, we're probably the only place in Pakistan, I don't know about other South Asian countries, which have artists to be from Afghanistan, from India, from Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bhutan. So, it's Nepal, and they all study together. I think that this connection, which was there traditionally in South Asia, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the arts of the book, the way that you find that cultural experience and activity is totally interwoven with poetry, with every kind of human expression, lived expression. There were no compartments, to separate the writer from the artist or the musician or the dancer or whatever. So I think that the university may be the new space where this can happen, and we've already embarked on that. As it is in the visual arts now, these boundaries are blurred, and we are encouraging that, very much so. It's very nice for us when we have a student from Bhutan who comes from a kind of an experience where faith and art and food and everything else is very closely connected. And then you also have the urban, child from Bombay or Karachi who sees themselves as a cutting edge designer. But when you present them with a project in which they have to go out of their cocoon and they have to go across, the great divides that we have of class and ethnicity and so on, they're forced to see that actually if they are to be problem solvers, they have to take note of the fact that they're looking at great diversity of expression, and it is part of their problem if they are to be problem solvers. So I think that this is the way that we are moving, which is one of the reasons why we did the MOU with Sirishti. It's very rare to find institutions between India and Pakistan signing MOUs. It's practically a no-no in certain areas. But I think with the arts, one has that kind of a freedom. And also people, because the establishment thinks we are harmless. So they'll allow us to move forward. And then sometimes take credit for what we achieve. So much of the conflict in South Asia, and South Asia is a very conflict-ridden part of the world, so much of the conversation starts with cultural connections and with overtures which are made between people from the cultural arena, whether it's literature, whether it's music, certainly with the visual arts. And so I think that in many ways we can be proud of the fact that we are the avant-garde for all kinds of peacemaking. I think that this may become a way actually of firming up connections. I think in the last 25 years, both sides of the Punjab have become aware, and I think it's been the diaspora actually which has helped in this, has motivated people to disregard the issues between the two countries, and sort of putting the states aside. They have looked at possibilities of really connecting the Punjab in ways that are extremely enriching for both. This is the unfinished chapter of independence, and it has more to do with just peacemaking. I think that we split a picture down the middle and not left anything which makes efforts easier to piece it together again. You can have political divides, it's there, you have examples all over the world. But to enrich cultural life, I think it becomes imperative for all people who work in these areas to find ways and means to talk, to make projects together, to do publications together, to do exhibitions together, to do festivals together. And one takes one's hat off to people who've been managing to do this through very difficult times. I think that this was there, centuries ago.
Yes.
It was very much there. I think that the colonial experience actually of the separation of formal education from informal learning, I think that actually meant that so many of these threads were there actually slashed, and to then reconnect them is problematic, because you're dealing with a contemporary experience and you kind of lost the ways and means to do it. So you have to rethink it, and that is where I think many new ways of education and that we have been seeing both in the West and its translations into various kinds of projects in countries like Pakistan, and I'm sure here too, is that with special reference to disadvantaged groups, because they have to catch up faster. And so you find that there are more innovative ways of making education available, learning available, certainly with reference to disadvantaged groups like women. When you come to the visual arts, you find that you have a kind of breathing space, and you can think of real life situations, you can think of real life problems, you can make the work personal, make the projects personal to the artists, young artist students' experience, and then see that okay, there are so many pathways on that journey. And very often, at least in the kind of institution that I am in, you're left free, apart from a very rough curriculum, which is quite, we're working on making it even vaguer than it ought to be. It gives you the freedom to actually to construct your projects in the way that you want to, which means, and I think this has happened a lot in the last 2 decades, that materials and mediums which are particular to communities or to women, they become the grist for the mill, they become the way of working, so that we question this whole hegemony of oil on canvas. I think that so much of, I will say new art, but it's there in literature, of songs that are sung, things that happen at weddings, things that happen in rural communities which are no longer really rural. The cities and their ways have encroached upon them. But there's an inability somewhere here to really discuss that and to come to terms with it and to make new art forms and perhaps new ways of expression which can deal with this great change. So we see these very tangible instances of words that are disappearing from the language because they're disappearing from your environment. So one needs to connect, and because it is an object crafted in the village, you see that okay, so it's disappearing from, not only from the lexicon, but it's disappearing from craft, from used craft. I think that cultural anthropologists, I think artists, I think poets, I think these people have to kind of come together and perhaps look at particular instances and make them symbolic of these changes that are happening very fast, probably faster than we are aware of. I think that more and more this the fact that it can be a very rich relationship, which for some strange reason, because of the divide, becomes even more enriching. I think when you lose something, then when you can reclaim it, it somehow is far more valuable. And this is happening now. It's happening a lot between the two Punjabs, of course, with the coming of pilgrims, the Sikh pilgrims to Pakistan, all of that. But more than that, there's a desire to share in prosperity. I had gone some years ago to Amritsar. It was for the same South Asia Foundation meeting that I'm here for. And we went to the university, and they asked me to speak. Now my Punjabi is not my husband, who's a thoroughbred Lahori Punjabi. He sort of says, your accent is an Urdu accent, and so I made great fun of. But there, when I was speaking, of course I spoke in Punjabi. And they said, "Tadi Punjabi kinni mithi hai, tadi boli kinni mithi hai." I saw my husband is like smiling away. I said, "नहीं तुसी तो होर ही तरीके नाल बोलदे हो, बहुत मिठी है, तुसी आंदे हो तो बड़ा लगदा है कि भाई ऐ की जी फुल ने जी ऐ फुल ने." And he was like, But I think that these are sort of the rediscovery of many things, things that had been lost. And now there's a kind of, there's a new memory developing actually, which is, I think it can give rise to new inspirations for literature, for music. We've already seen it happen with music, and I think with visual forms also. So I think there's a lot to share. We just need the vehicles and means to first to study, to document where things are, and then to figure out, okay, which are areas in which there can be joint study and collaborations, and they can have any number of outcomes. I mean, they could be films, they could be video installation, they could be publications, they could. I remember I asked my father that you never wrote poetry on what happened in 47, one poem which came much later, Subhai Azadi. So he said, huh, we couldn't cope. So I think, that trauma of, a land separated out of great slaughter, I think that also has to be recognized. It silences people because you're so deeply traumatized at the shock of what you have done to one another. And I think it can be very, very enriching to have these conversations to start with, and then subsequently to bring certain carefully chosen examples, if you like, in the different arts and literature to maybe make a little kind of a forum.
So what's your sense?
I think that you have to look at Pakistan's particular case of our history, our recent history, the political history, has been a denial of ethnic and regional rights. Punjab, anyway, I think after annexation by the British, Punjabi language was kind of pushed to the group. And that continued after 1947 because of the desire for centralization. Punjabi is not in our schools, it's absent from our schools. Children are taught in Urdu and then later in English. So its absence from academia, certainly up to, well, almost all through education, unless you opt to study Punjabi as a subject at university level or at college level, it's not there. So this denial of the mother tongue, I think, is something which is a palpable tragedy in Punjab. So, and yet the oral tradition, of Bulle Shah, Shah Hussain and all of that is so much there. It's there every Thursday when you go to the shrine. It's there throughout. I mean, and people quote, and so there's a divide between the oral, which is still strong as a connection in people's lives with history, and on the other hand, with literature, you have to be especially interested in literature to really own that. So that is an issue. And I know that, for example, with my father, with Faiz, it was, he was constantly reviled by the Punjabi writers that why aren't you writing, in Punjabi? And I mean, his answer was that, okay, one or two shares of mine, couplets, they can attempt to come close to Ghalib. But I can't aspire to Bulle Shah because he's somewhere there and I'm, down there. So I think that this has been a factor. So many, brilliant writers have chosen to write in Urdu rather than Punjabi and have subsequently been translated into Punjabi. And of course, Faiz is translated into Punjabi also by Ahmed Salim, who was always one of my father's sort of, tapping on the shoulder, conscience, Faiz sab to usne likhya. So that is how my father actually wrote in Punjabi, he did it. He had these people badgering him. So he would say, and he was very apologetic, and he would say, I don't know whether it really is up to anything. It's for you people, you guys to tell me. But towards the end of his life, when he went to his village, I think it was a year before he died, when he finally came back from exile from Beirut, I accompanied him. We went to the village, and all the village people had collected. And that is where I first heard him recite in Punjabi to the villagers. Came back. So I think he was always extremely clear about the need for the Punjabi language to not only to be nurtured, by strengthened, by by writers who felt confident that this was their first language. Today, there's a growing sense among writers who are primarily writing in Punjabi that they need first to strengthen their own constituency. And that can only happen when there is greater effort to bring Punjabi into the mainstream in the schools, which is totally absent from. To bring it to strengthen Punjabi departments, which again are almost absent, except in a couple of universities. So that is somewhere we need help actually from friends elsewhere. So there are these things which if you search, you find that actually they absorb the experience of being a Punjabi, and then they're expressed in a classical language, if you please. So I think that has to do with the history of our history of our learning, and therefore then our history of expression. It's like you had no patronage for the arts in all these years, or very minimal. Therefore, the visual arts actually took upon themselves to be independent of, which is many ways is good, because as we know, state patronage can sometimes be the state of kiss of death.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that is true. So that existing outside means there are less tabs kept on it. There are fewer directions. There are no official poets, no official writers. While in Urdu there have been many, because that was where the state made it made it lucrative for some. It made, it more palatable for others. So I agree that existing outside of academia sometimes is perhaps a blessing. But of course, you're denied many platforms also. So it's both sides.
ਆ ਵਸ ਨੇੜੇ